let me just say some words about the fourth industrial revolution and Globalization 4.0. I wrote a book and conceptualized the idea. I was probably the first to use this name or this definition, fourth industrial revolution, as being a transforming concept, not only for businesses, but also for the economy, for politics, and for society. And of course, many people ask me, why do you speak about the fourth industrial revolution? It's very easy to explain. Of course, the first industrial revolution we are all familiar with. It was the invention of the steam engine, which actually helped to enlarge our physical power. And then we had the second industrial revolution, which mainly happened here in this country, very much also here in this region, which allowed mass production. And then we had the third industrial revolution with the starting of the computer age and the digital era. And now the fourth industrial revolution is not just a prolongation of this digitalization, it's much more. It's a combination of technologies. It's not just the digital technology. Just think of genetics, think of brain research, and so on. And the power of the fourth industrial revolution comes from the combination of all those technologies. Actually, I was saying it's at the end what the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities. So that's the first difference. The second differentiation is the speed. When I wrote the book, I started to write it for years ago. It was published 3 years ago. It was sold, very interesting, over 1 million times in the world. And what is interesting is that 800,000 copies, more than 800,000 copies of those 2 million were sold in 3 countries alone: China, Japan, and South Korea. And you may be interested, who was the biggest buyer with 16,000 copies at the same time? It was the Korean military. Because the fourth industrial revolution will have a major impact also on warfare. So, see, when I wrote this book, I looked at all the different technologies, and then some of the reaction was, oh, that's science fiction, that's tomorrow. Now, if I look back in 3 years, how much the world has changed. And blockchain, I remember in Davos at our annual meeting 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I organized a breakfast for financial ministers of finance, and the head of central banks. And practically, some experts had to explain what blockchain is. And today, you do not have a central bank which has not, let's say, a big research unit in this area. Bitcoins and so on have become a reality of our lives. Also, 3 years ago, people would tell me, self-driving cars, that's something for the beginning of the 20s. Today, even in a small Swiss mountain place, we have now a bus which, on an experimental way, is self-driving. So those technologies come with a tremendous speed. And one of the problems we have in the world is that we are not sufficiently prepared to cope with the speed of change. And I think this is at the origin also of certain political manifestations. If, for example, people say, let's take control back again, they want to protect themselves against this tremendous speed of change which we are seeing around. I could go on and speak about the impact on jobs, on education, and so on. The World Economic Forum has published a report where we say we should not talk only about the people who actually will lose their jobs or could lose their jobs, and we are optimistic in the long term. The problem will be to manage the short term, because with the speed of the fourth industrial revolution, contrary to the past, to the previous three revolutions, probably jobs will be faster destroyed compared to new ones being created. And here, if we look, let's say, at other implications of the fourth industrial revolution, I just would like to mention the impact this revolution has on us. It's changing not only, like the first three, what we are doing, it's changing us. We are creating algorithm, but algorithm may change us and our behavior. And we haven't really thought through what it means. But this again amplifies the fear of people who feel losing control, and then of course try to find protection in believing in more, let's say, populist approaches. Now let me say some words, and we can elaborate later in the discussion on the impact of the fourth industrial revolution. Let me say some words about Globalization 4.0. The World Economic Forum is very often accused, or if I may use this word, as being, let's say, the Mecca of globalists, and that Davos has played a big role in creating this globalist philosophy, which is resented by quite a number of people. Actually, globalization, even if some people speak about the need for deglobalization or the possibility of deglobalization, but we feel the world will be more globalized in the future and not globalized. Because again, if you take the fourth industrial revolution, we will become even more interdependent and more interrelated than ever before. Because in a digital world, you do not have boundaries, or you have maybe official boundaries, as some countries try to establish. But the trend is much more into the direction of more globalization. So the question is not globalization, yes or not. The question is what type of globalization. And we need a different type of globalization. And the World Economic Forum has always fought for creating what we call a responsible globalization. So we need a globalization which is more sustainable. I foresee that we will have to confront the completely new activism, which we see now already with the students' movement, what you see even in Geneva. We have now on Fridays and Saturdays a lot of children going on the street We had invited, by the way, Greta to come, you know, this famous Swedish girl, to come to Davos. I think this will determine very much the discussion between the old and the young generation. I think there's now a feeling developing where the young people feel our elders solve issues on our back. And we have a very short time to take action. And I think there will be tremendous pressure from the young generation in the future to address those issues. At the end, globalization, which like every competitive measure is creating winners and losers, the excuse that globalization is creating much more winners and losers is not anymore enough. Because today, in the age of social media and the possibility to mobilize, even if you are a minority, to mobilize a strong political force means that you cannot leave people behind anymore. If I look at what we call the gilets jaunes, what is the English word, the yellow, in France, it's an expression of a revolt of urban areas against rural areas against the urban areas. It's a minority, but the minority occupies at the moment the political discussion, and it has tremendous political influence. So if you look at the globalization 4.0, the globalization which we should aim at tomorrow, it should be a globalization where we really do not leave people behind anymore. So social safety nets, tax systems which make sure that we do not have a too large gap between those who win, and who win particularly from the fourth industrial revolution, and those who lose are not, let's say, becoming a major political issue.
But ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, the future is already here. The future has begun. It's a new system. It changes us, because it's a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological spheres. It's the integration of those spheres. Just think of sensors planted into our brains. The opportunities are immense, and we have to prepare ourselves already now.